The Suspicious Girlfriend. Christmas Eve held a special kind of magic for the narrator, a young boy who was still navigating life without his mother, who had passed away when he was very young. His father, a hard-working and devoted parent, had been dating a woman named Sydney for a while. Sydney, with her warm smile and seemingly kind demeanor, had become a regular presence at their home, especially on weekends. For the narrator and his siblings, Sydney brought a sense of normalcy, a motherly figure they hadn't experienced in years. This year, Sydney stayed with them for Christmas. She joined in on their family traditions, from watching Elf together to sharing hot cocoa by the glow of the Christmas tree. For a brief moment, the house felt whole again, and the narrator began to wonder if Sydney might eventually become a permanent part of their lives. As night fell, the children stayed up late watching the Polar Express after their dad and Sydney had gone to bed. Around midnight, curiosity got the better of the narrator. He was at the age where the belief in Santa Claus was waning, and he wanted to confirm his suspicions that it was his dad who placed the gifts under the tree. Quietly slipping out of his room, he crept up the stairs toward the living room, where the tree's twinkling lights cast a warm glow over the darkened house. At first, he was excited to see gifts piled beneath the tree, but as his eyes adjusted to the light, he noticed Sydney crouched by the tree. She wasn't placing gifts, she was shaking them, inspecting the tags, and even opening a gift bag to examine its contents. His heart raced as he watched her pull out a makeup set clearly intended for his sister, only to scrutinize it before shoving it back into the bag. The narrator froze, unsure of what to do. He watched as Sydney moved to the kitchen, where his father's wallet sat on the counter. She opened it and pulled out several bills, slipping them into the pocket of her pajama pants. Then, as if emboldened, she opened the cabinet where his father kept his prescription medications. She removed a bottle, sniffed it, and examined it closely. At that moment, she glanced over her shoulder and locked eyes with the boy. Her expression shifted instantly from surprise to something darker. Closing the cabinet, she approached him with slow, deliberate steps. "What are you doing up?" she whispered sharply. "You shouldn't be spying on people." Caught off guard, he stammered something about wanting to see if Santa had come. Sydney's lips curled into a tense smile. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," she insisted. "I was just checking to make sure your dad's taking his medication. Go back to bed." The boy fled back to his room, heart pounding. He crawled under the covers, his mind racing with questions. What was Sydney doing? Was she stealing? Why would she take his dad's money and go through his medicine? Minutes later, he heard the creak of his bedroom door. He'd locked it, something his father usually prohibited, and for the first time he was grateful for breaking the rule. The doorknob jiggled several times before the sound of retreating footsteps confirmed she had left. The next morning, Christmas Day, began with the usual excitement. The family gathered to open presents, and for a moment, the boy thought he might have imagined everything. But his sense of unease returned when his father stormed into the living room furious. "Who took $60 from my wallet?" he demanded. The boy immediately looked at Sydney, who glanced back at him with a knowing, almost daring look. She didn't say a word, but her expression spoke volumes. Later, when his father's frustration hadn't subsided, the boy pulled him aside and recounted everything he'd seen. At first, his father was skeptical. "Are you sure? That's a serious accusation," he said. But as the boy described Sydney going through the medicine cabinet, his father's face darkened. "Why would you make that up?" he murmured, now clearly torn between disbelief and suspicion. That evening, an argument erupted between his father and Sydney. She denied everything, claiming the boy had misunderstood her actions. But her defensiveness only deepened his father's doubts. Despite her protests, the seeds of mistrust had been sown. A few days later, after another unsettling incident, the details of which his father never shared, Sydney left for good. The narrator felt a mix of relief and pride, knowing his honesty had protected his family. Lesson learned. The experience left the narrator with a deeper understanding of trust and vigilance. While Sydney had initially seemed like a kind and caring figure, her actions revealed a darker side. It taught the family the importance of listening to one another and trusting their instincts, even when it was difficult to confront uncomfortable truths. For the boy, it was a Christmas he would never forget, one that Remias